I will try. It has been it's difficult to be the last one to speak because things have been very many, very interesting, and so I've tried to prepare something, and now it has changed a lot, and I didn't. But then I was listening, so I didn't have the time. So maybe I will be a bit confused. I hope not too much. I have to say that the best part was Tony Salami for me. And
I hope it would have been 98 weeks, for example. Tony said.
Sorry. And now I want to connect a certain can anyone turn the TV on?
I think I've been tidy. It's
Maybe because I put that.
Yeah. I thought you were using that. You see. That's okay.
Was that yesterday? I was almost.
Talk amongst yourselves.
And well. Sorry.
What's your term?
Yeah, so my term was many of them. I started to use 3 of them, but then now I've changed all of them. So initially the idea was to talk about, I seem to remember, autonomy, competence, and responsibility, but somehow autonomy has remained as such, and competency and responsibility has come together to the idea of ecology that I think is important, and the question of invasion. So 3 terms that are linked together, and I hope I can go through in some way in this short presentation. And in a certain way, it's the idea of I think that it's interesting to look at constituencies as Susan Listar used to say, looking at the boring things, doing a study of boring things, doing a study of what are the minimal elements, because I think that there is where
be careful with the blue thing. The blue thing is sometimes
hi. Maybe we can do it without. Well,
Is John still around?
yeah. Like, I will take 1 more minute, and then if we cannot find the solution, I can.
2 minutes.
Have you got a USB stick? Just as a round of last chance.
John, there's a USB stick in your
In my, I was thinking.
Yes, you can slišal ločka.
There you go. This one's very interesting. Why is it being one of those
I think maybe that's what it
maybe you need to take out the stick that's over there. That's
Could do.
Ista pa sam ne bojem, dva zunanja. Mislim, da smo malo prepozni, tako najavljam, pa ta vod pa so.
Okay, so I.
Ne,
No, I can start.
Che vous présentate
Jesus Christ.
So I will start from an Italian Tony Salame, and, because I think that what is interesting is that somehow we are in a moment in which constituencies are quite ambivalent. In Europe, we come back to the south of Europe, and we come back to a place where this man who comes from a fascist group of the 70s has been one of the person in charge of quite a few killings, La Strage di Bologna, important terrorist acts in Italy. And now he has decided that his thing was business. And so he has set up a criminal network, and is running the rubbish, all the rubbish public services in Rome, all the refugee policies in the city, and in a famous interception of his, now he's under a charge, but has been like that until a year ago, and a few months ago in an interception on the phone line, he said we can get much more money out of refugees and rubbish than out of drugs and prostitution. So this is the concept of what is a constituency, because the constituency is a relation between the constituent and the constituted, but is also a relationship that is inside all the ambivalences of social life. And I think that in this sense, sometimes I feel very attracted by these boring things, because in boring things you can avoid certain level of emotional transport of the greatest days of history, no? And look at the ordinary facts. And so maybe I don't believe enough in history, but I get very excited about how we could change the protocols for booking an appointment with the GP in my neighborhood, with the local doctor. And I think that I would like to try to make a journey extramuri from the institution in the social life of the city. In Barcelona, where in the municipal election of 2015, with the victory of Barcelona en Comú, a grassroots platform, I think that the practices of institutional critique and our experiences, the experiences that, for example, Internazionale has been a hub for, are relevant to think other places than only museums or only cultural production. My worry is somehow how we can rethink and use today the debates about constituencies, audiences, publics, that, for example, has been so important in the early 2000s, and how can we imagine these debates beyond the field of cultural production, in the crisis, but also in the invasion of welfare, of the state, and in the specific of policy making. This is a quite boring thing, because we have to talk about the protocols, and we are trying, for example, with Marta Malo in Madrid, to talk about healthcare, education, borders, and so on. I think before the corpse of martial citizenship, before the corpse of this citizenship that has been built throughout the 19th and the 20th century out of this idea of universal inclusion and long etc., it's interesting to think how to think audience and publics and citizens and the emancipation in a waiting room, or in the waiting room of a local branch of the healthcare system that has been affected by local cuts, by austerity measures. No? How to translate the formats and the concepts of institutional critique in the rooms and the protocols of policy workers, public workers, in the quotidian definition of procedures. How to use the radical analytical tools of radical politics, self-education, pedagogy, radical education, the subaltern critique, etc., when we are working with public servants. So what means when we are working with deprived areas, vulnerable communities, a long set of prefix categories, but that at the same time are also the place where we can think about intervening in providing housing rights and so on. So I think that this ambivalence of rethinking the practice of critique in a place of a great rigidity is somehow what we have to do in order to stop these people from taking the institution themselves. And for me today, the problem of constituencies, to say the usership, the public in relation to the institution and the state and the administration of the state, is not the problem of the commons as something new, to be produced anew, but the question of how to imagine a transition from the modern social democratic and neoliberal welfare as well to an altrove, an elsewhere that exists in the possibilities of our own reality. Knowing that we have to transform what already exists, because there are the infrastructure, because there are the capitals, because there are the funders, the protocols. We have to change the protocols. We cannot just make protocols anew, because in the Barcelona administration, for example, you have 3,000, 5,000 people working there. And you cannot you have to use that people in a useful way. And in order to do that, you have to discuss about what are the protocols, how to change the subjectivation of the people. So I will try to focus on three questions: how to escape the autonomy of institutions, the relation between the instituted and the constituent, what are the implications of this invasion, of this possibility of invasion, so the relation between the constituent and the instituted, and what is an ecology of change, or better, an ecology in transition. And so the relation between the instituent and the constituent. Or at least I will try to do that in the time I have, and if I have some more time, I will also pose some questions, but let's see if I can do that. I think that the genealogy and the debates of institutional critique in the field of culture in the 80s and in the 70s, in the 80s and 90s and in the last 40 years are have been really important for me to think and settle in a series of critical categories and radical categories of organization of institutional machines. No? And I think that in Spain, but in Europe in general, the question is how to think how critique can become a tool for breaking in a series of other institutional machines in other parts of the state. So if it's true that the representational politics have been disrupted by the disarticulation of any integer, as Partha Chatterjee says, no, the integer as this integer citizen that is just one identity, when we are really in a in the disintegrated citizenship. Well, we see that the MACBA, for example, in the early 2000s, and a lot of other spaces, what Boyana was just telling us, show it very clearly and interestingly, and so on. We can see that these have been places where to prefigurate what the citizen could become, a sort of expressive citizenship rather than representational citizenship, to take one word that Raoul started to use at some point and then left behind, that was the idea of moving from a representative institution to an expressive institution. But nonetheless, I think that today this self-reflection of the institution about what representation and expression can be in the cultural institution and so on needs to be contrasted, needs to be actively contrasted. The mirror of the institution, as Subcomandante Marcos used to say, we need to break the mirror, and we have to play with the broken pieces and the sharp and the dangerous pieces of a broken mirror, and end up in this post-representational scenario of politics, whatever this could end up meaning. And so post-representation is this empty signifier, not to use another buzzword of our time. But on the other hand, I think that autonomy can be a dangerous word for us, because instead of being the capability of self-organizing, and self-defining modes of ruling among each other can become the ore in Guarani, the ore in Guarani, so that the exclusive us. Autonomy as a solipsism, the autonomy of critical institution, just as another facet of the autonomy of the political from society. A space of self-reproduction that doesn't engage with the ambivalences and the contradiction of the broken up mirror, a machine that does not intersect and cooperate, collaborate with society. So using what Donna Haraway says, we should think not about resolving the problems, but about staying with the trouble. And so I think that the trouble of a public institution like Madrid is that the Cavalcada del Rey, the 6th of January, the most important popular intervention of the Ayuntamiento in the production of cultural, ordinary culture, as Raymond Williams would say, is this image, has been this image for many years, and Jesus Carrillo, no, reorganized it as in this way, so intervening in a very radical way in the production of the image, with the kids coming and seeing that and reconfiguring their idea of what is a black man, which is not a painted person. What is the legacy of coloniality? What is the legacy of gender? What is the production of, and how we can use the space of institutional politics at the level of Ayuntamiento to take the practices of radical critique into the field of politics. The most folkloric moment of the city life becomes all of a sudden a political and cultural debate, and this has been on the news for 2 weeks, like being the main discussion all through the Christmas holidays.
So these were the people put in jail now?
No, that's another. That's the carnival. This was Christmas, then there is carnival.
Alright.
And unfortunately, so it becomes a moment for introducing post-colonial legacies of tradition into the public debate about imagination and identities. What is the identity that is constructed here, and what is the identity that is constructed here? No? And about the post-secular construction of our subjectivities. What is the role of the church? I'm sorry, I had it on the computer. I don't have it here, but the Vatican Info Vaticana, which is Info Vaticana, said we are not recognizing the Conferencia Episcopal says we don't recognize this as the image of the kings. So there is an intervention that allows us to introduce all a series of practices of disruption inside not in the autonomy of institution, but somewhere else. And I think this is a risk, as Jesus has absolutely shown us, but it's also.
And his name is quite.
Yeah. But it's also something that.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Better believe it.
You better believe it.
But it's something that we need to engage with. I mean, we need to engage with the institutional critique in the university, as you were saying, in other institutions, in other parts of the state, because it's there where the ambivalence and the contrast, this urgency that Raul was mentioning when we were discussing yesterday about the publication, needs to be addressed. In the process of invading the institution, and here I come to the second term, the constituent process has to face both a vertical and an horizontal problem, reacting to the attack of the regime and producing a livable ecology in which to act and to etch the institutional space. There is a duality of verticality and horizontality. How to compose a direct dialogue with the city, capable of expanding the possibility of this and the complexity and the contradiction of institutional power, and at the same time composing capillary dispositives that can allow society to enter into the administration itself. So the point is how to think a critical practice of institution and link it to a material operativity. As you can say, how to put the general intellect to work for producing prototypes inside the political institution of our nations or of our cities, and so on. So the problem of invading and etching the institutional space in the municipal administration of Barcelona is, I think something quite interesting, because we cannot read the institutional space just in moral terms, as separated from the action of social life. The institution of Barcelona, the administration of Barcelona, for example, and Tonina can help me in this a lot, has been determined by the democratic transition, has been instituted in the early 80s, so the most of the public workers come from a radical understanding of what the institution can be, but also from the absolute denial and humiliation that neoliberalism has done over their public vocation of participating in building an institution with the people and for the people. But on the other hand, there is also the need to identifying this counterculture inside the institution, as the radical critique tell us, but also to enter into the production of new tools. So, for example, this is a photo that has just arrived to me on the Telegram, which is of the participation policies of the Ayuntamiento, and this is this image of the new project Decidim with the site Barcelona, and I think it's interesting for two reasons principally. First, because we are not just thinking about the ideologies, so the logics of ideas, but we are thinking about the technologies, so the logics of ways of doing, the technique. And we do it in this symbiotic way that Raul was mentioning yesterday. So we enter into this idea that the public institution and the society can be linked, but how we do it for real? We have to produce diagrams that allows, for example, we did a co-research project during the electoral campaign with the public workers to identify the organization of the administration and where were the tricks and the traps and the corruption and all this kind of system. But also with these people we try to monitor it, and some friend did a toolkit of participation with the public workers, because one of the problems that the users have in relation to the museum or to the big institution is that you arrive to the museum and you don't know where the Guernica is, and you arrive to the public institution and you don't know where you can, and you arrive with a problem. For example, I will tell you after about Trieste. You arrive with diabetes, but what you need actually to take care of yourself is somebody that can take you to have a good food chain, because if you don't resolve that, you cannot act on your health. So what the state has to do is not only paternalistically provide the services, but also allow the user to know the complexity and the radical a possible radical organization of the institution, so to say. So these have been the three levels, and I think that this becomes the way in which we open a Nyande, an open we, in which we construct a space of intervention. And the question here is how to intervene in order to facilitate a distribution of empowerment, a process of subjectivation, and the question should be also how to change the process of production of images and the aesthetics of public policies. So, for example, I think this is very interesting that all of a sudden our images of the social movements are on the back of the bus of all the city. It's really strong, and the campaign for the access to healthcare in Madrid has also been very, very interesting. But I think that again, the practices and the memories and the experiences, the instances of reality of institutional critique in the last many years needs to engage in these grounds as part of a collaboration, as part of cooperation, and the risk a lot. In this sense, what I want to say is that constituencies are actually ecologies. It is a matter of thinking social and political relationships through mechanisms of transversality, of assemblages, different lives, groups, stories that can encounter and enrich each other. And this is why I refer to it as an ecology of change, and actually of an ecology in transition. I don't think that we can produce things anew. What we need to do is to think how we take the welfare desertic ecology and populate it, inhabit it, and make it flourish again, but change it and go somewhere else. Institutional change and welfare transformation should be addressed as a transition, a radical reorganization of the social legal practices of public institutions in order to respond to a new situation, a new constellation of governance and needs that are rising from the social, economical, and environmental consequences of the crisis, thinking ecology in a Guattarian sense, obviously, and thinking that the institution have to produce new politics of care. So, as Joe Lewis puts it, it's a matter of positing the recovery from the crisis as an opportunity of transformation for the better. I don't know if I will just take another 5 minutes if this is not too much, because I think that the last part of my presentation goes on what's happening in Trieste right now. In Trieste, as you may know, since the 70s there has been a radical project of institutional critique in a field that cannot be autonomous at any point, that is healthcare, mental healthcare concretely. And Franco Basaglia was proposing in the early 70s the idea, the problem of management, il problema della gestione. And he was saying the question for us is, he was reading Fanon, and Fanon decision of renounce to his position as the head of the mental health care system in Algeria, because the mental health care system in Algeria was really problematic, to use a euphemism. And Basaglia says, obviously, Fanon has chosen the revolution, but for obvious reason, he says in the text, we cannot do the same. We are obliged to manage institutions that in the last instance we deny. So I think this question of managing and denying a space of social organization that at the same time limits subjective freedom and foster emancipation is a very contemporary question for our practices of institutional critique, not only in the museums but in society in general. And I really like what Franco Rotelli, who has been the director of the mental health care system in Trieste for 20 years, who has fostered a system of organization of mental health care that is in the city, that is done where the hospital is. Here is just a little piece in a very big ecologies, done of cooperatives, done of housing projects, done of laboratories. And what it says is that the institutions should build benches done of snow. So it says the mental health care user is a person that needs to rest for a while in order to be able to come back and participate in society, in social reproduction. So the institution should provide a bench for him to rest, or for her to rest, and not care so much if then the bench will melt down and the institution will have to invent itself again from the beginning. Because the point is not the social reproduction of the institution, the problem is the social reproduction of that person, of that user, and his possibility, her possibility to participate in social life. It doesn't matter if these benches and services will melt in spring and the institution will have to reinvent itself once and again. Actually, this is what guarantees that the institutional invention will start again to be invented. And I think that there are two things that are very important to me in this sense. One is something that Giovanna Del Giudice, another doctor from the mental health care system of Trieste, says, that is the fact that we have to disrupt competencies. We have to produce continuous transversalities inside public policies. Because segmenting these policies is the way in which the users comes to be reduced to a passive user of the institution. the possibility of having hubs inside the institution that continuously disrupt competencies is the way in which we can make the institution a space of invasion from society. And the second thing is the practice of, in an anthropogenic mode of production, as Raul was saying before, is this practice of disrupting competencies, making benches of snow and so on, as a practice of anthropophagy, to use Eduardo Viveros do Castro definition, as a mechanism of cultural appropriation and redistribution that question dependence and allows for an action from the periphery. So, how to think, facing the cannibalism of the big society, that there is an anthropophagy from outside the state to retake the social practice of administration and the state. In Trieste, the mental health care reform of the 70s and the 80s has been a process of anthropophagy in relation to the apparatus of the state, a radical transformation that has eaten up the total institution of the asylum and has reproduced it as a system of facilities, services, resources, with medical intervention, but social and subjective practices, with a sort of constitution of monstrous machine in the core of the mental health care system, with cooperatives, common houses, and so on. I think what is at stake here is a process of institutional critique working in the open space of the city, and that what we have to think and what I want to contribute was this idea that constituencies should be the collective construction or the common construction of new policies of care, where workers, users are agencies that manipulate the state to respond to needs and to collaborate, cooperate in inventing desires. So the question that I launched to you is what is the role of art in this thing? What is the role of research? What is and I think that we have questions that are translations, transversality, formats, pedagogies, aesthetics. All these words, all these practice, all these memories needs to be taken out of the black box into the city. And I really love this image of Trieste because they've done a series of drawings, and the first drawing that I don't have here unfortunately, but probably I can find online quickly, is what is the museum, the asylums.
Synonyms.
When they enter in the 71, and this is the last image of what has been. Let's see if I can find it. Well, I will do without the last image, but I think it's for me it's very interesting to see how we have in this image the idea of breaking apart the institution and making it something that is completely organic or not symbiotic to the life of the city. I think this is today the challenge against the man I show in the first moment and Tony Salame, and that this challenge needs to be taken from the practice of institutional critique and cultural institutions as well. Thank you.